It began on a lonely mining outpost called Lyra 7, a forgotten station sitting on the cold edge of the galaxy where the stars looked thin and tired. The place was small, quiet, and carved into rock that almost never saw sunlight. For years, workers lived simple lives, digging for rare minerals, sending reports, and hoping the main empires would one day remember they existed. But in the last few weeks, something changed. Strange shadows began to slide over the sky, so faint that people first believed it was only dust moving across the clouds. Then the shadows started returning at the same time each night, stretching in long, impossible shapes that looked like they did not belong to any living creature known in the galaxy. The workers felt cold even when standing near heat lamps. They started avoiding windows and slept with lights on because they felt watched, like the darkness held a pair of unseen eyes. The sensors on the outpost began to glitch without any warning. One day the scanners showed empty skies, and the next day they detected massive objects approaching before instantly disappearing again. The commander ordered several checks, but every mechanic reported the same thing: nothing was broken. The machines simply refused to work correctly, as if something outside the station was interfering with them. Power levels dipped at random hours, and the lights flickered in every hallway like the entire station was breathing slowly and painfully. The workers whispered in the mess hall that maybe something had arrived in the darkness, something moving around them like a silent hunter. No one wanted to say it out loud, but everyone felt the same fear growing deeper each night. Then came the night when everything fell apart. It happened without warning. The alarms exploded with a sharp scream that echoed across every wall, sending workers running out of their rooms. The sky above Lyra 7 split open like a sheet of torn metal. A giant rift appeared, stretching across the atmosphere, glowing with a cold white light that made the air shake. It looked like the universe itself had been sliced open. Every person on the outpost stopped and stared at the sky in horror as something massive moved behind the tear. Too large to understand, too dark to identify. It felt like a giant shadow crawling out of another world, pushing against the thin skin of reality. Even the mountains trembled. The commander ordered communications open. They tried calling the nearest empire, the nearest trade route, the nearest patrol ship, but no one answered. Their signals vanished into static. The galaxy around them felt silent, too silent, as if every major power had turned their back on Lyra 7. The workers felt like insects trapped in a small glass box while something huge pressed its face against the outside, watching quietly. They were too small, too weak, too unimportant for any empire to help. The commander knew it. Everyone knew it. This station was not valuable enough to save. As the rift grew brighter, the shadows behind it moved faster, like claws scraping against the light. The ground shook again. A worker screamed. Another fell to his knees. Everyone expected the sky to break completely and bury them with whatever was pushing from the other side. In desperation, the commander opened the old emergency beacon, a device so ancient that dust covered its switches. It had only one purpose, one command, one destination. It sent a call into deep space, but not to any empire of the galaxy. It was coded for one species only, one that everyone feared, one that people only whispered about during dark nights when they thought no one could hear. It was sent to the Deathworlders. Humanity. The miners stood silent. Some prayed for help. Others prayed that humans would never receive the signal. Because every story they had ever heard about humans ended in one of two ways: salvation or destruction, and both looked the same when the sky was burning. The Deathworlders were famous not for kindness, not for mercy, but for surviving worlds that should have killed them, fighting wars that no other species could imagine, and building ships that looked more like monsters than machines. Stories said humans once fought an entire armada with only 3 of their ships, and the armada never returned. Stories said humans disappeared into silence long ago, but their weapons still slept under forgotten moons, waiting for the day they were needed again. The beacon launched into space, pulsing brightly like a scream drifting between the stars. Every person on the outpost watched it disappear, knowing they had just invited something dangerous, maybe more dangerous than the rift itself. The commander tried to calm everyone, but even he could not hide the fear in his voice. If the Deathworlders heard the call, they might send help. But they might also send what they were truly known for: A nightmare ship, a vessel built not to save people but to end threats with brutal speed and power. A ship that arrived without warning, without lights, without words, only silence and judgment. The workers slept badly that night. Some dreamed of the rift swallowing the station. Others dreamed of human warships falling out of the sky like black meteors. The shadows above Lyra 7 grew longer, moving slower, as if waiting for something. The air felt tight, like the entire station was trapped inside a giant hand. Every corridor hummed with a strange, low vibration that no one could explain. Even when the workers tried to speak, their voices sounded too soft. On the second night, the sky turned red for a brief second, and every person felt a wave of pressure pressing down on their chest. The rift opened again, wider than before. The commander stood outside, gripping the railing so hard his fingers turned white. He stared at the tear in the sky and wondered if they had made the biggest mistake of their lives. Maybe calling the Deathworlders was the wrong choice. Maybe something else was listening in the dark. And far away, beyond the borders of known space, something answered. A signal returned, faint at first, like a heartbeat of metal. The workers heard the sound through the walls and didn't understand what it meant, but the commander did. His face went pale. His hands began to shake. He whispered to himself, "They heard it. They are coming." No one could tell if he felt relief or terror. Hours passed. The station became quiet as a tomb. Everyone waited for something, anything. Then the sensors, which had been dead for days, lit up all at once. A massive object appeared on the scans, moving faster than anything anyone had ever seen. It was approaching Lyra 7 at impossible speed. Workers ran outside, looking at the sky, searching for a ship, a light, a shadow, but there was nothing. Then the stars blinked. A huge dark shape appeared above the outpost without making a sound. No engine noise. No thrusters. No warning. It simply existed, floating in the air like a giant piece of the night sky had detached itself and fallen toward them. The ship had no markings, no bright colors, no friendly lights. It was black, silent, and shaped like something built to frighten the universe itself. Its surface looked alive, moving in slow waves like muscle under armor. Every person froze. No one spoke. Even the wind stopped. The commander realized one terrible truth. The Deathworlders did not send help. They sent that a nightmare ship, a vessel so strange that the air shook around it. The workers stepped back slowly, staring at the ship like it was a sleeping beast that could open its jaws at any moment. Some began to cry softly. Others whispered prayers. No one understood what humans wanted or why they sent such a terrifying machine. But everyone understood one thing. Whatever had come through the rift, this ship was not here to negotiate. It was here to end it. The nightmare ship hovered above Lyra 7 in complete silence, like a giant shadow glued to the sky, watching the colony without blinking. No engine roared. No weapon pointed outward. But its presence alone made the air feel heavy, like gravity itself had thickened. Workers stood frozen under it, feeling a strange pressure in their bones, as if the ship could sense every heartbeat. Children clung to their parents. Miners locked their doors even though no lock could stop something like this. The commander tried to speak, but his voice cracked, and all he managed was a shaky whisper that carried across the metal platform, "They are here." He kept telling himself he had made the right choice when he sent the beacon, but now he wasn't sure. The Deathworlders had not arrived like rescuers. They had arrived like executioners. Inside control rooms, officers looked at their screens with wide eyes. The sensors struggled to read the ship. Its energy signature was unlike anything ever recorded. It didn't seem to run on fuel or heat. It felt as if the ship was alive, pulsing with a cold, slow heartbeat that the machines couldn't understand. Engineers backed away from their panels, afraid to touch anything that might look like a threat. One of them whispered, "It's not a ship, it's a warning." But no one dared correct him because it didn't feel like a machine built by hands. It felt like something designed in the dark, by a species that didn't fear anything, not even the universe itself. Through the thick silence, a low hum began to vibrate across the ground, so subtle that workers weren't sure if they actually heard it or simply felt it in their bones. The metal floors trembled softly, as if something enormous was waking up inside the ship. For a moment, the people of Lyra 7 believed it would open fire. They believed the sky would fall. They believed they had made a mistake that would destroy them. But instead, a single thin beam of soft blue light extended from the bottom of the ship and touched the ground gently, like a finger brushing against dust. The miners stepped back instantly. The commander raised his hand, telling everyone not to move. Then something unbelievable happened. A figure stepped out of the beam. A human. He looked calm, almost too calm, dressed in a black suit made of a strange metal-like fabric that reflected no light. His face was emotionless, like he had seen 1,000 worlds fall and none of it mattered anymore. His eyes were sharp and cold, not angry, but focused in a way that made people feel transparent, as if he could see their memories, their fears, their lies. His boots touched the ground without a sound. He didn't look left or right. He didn't show fear or curiosity. He simply walked toward the commander like he already knew everything that had happened here. The workers expected him to speak with kindness, maybe reassurance, but there was no softness in him. He stopped in front of the commander and looked up at the broken sky where the rift still pulsed faintly. And then, in a voice so calm yet so heavy that it felt like the ground listened to him, he asked only one question: who opened the rift? The commander swallowed hard. His throat felt dry. The way the human spoke made the entire colony fall silent. People felt that this question was not simply a question. It was an accusation. The commander explained everything he knew. The shadows in the sky, the sensor glitches, the energy drops, the strange pressure in the air, and the night when the tear sliced open the atmosphere. As he spoke, the human listened without blinking, without nodding, without showing a single reaction. He simply stood still, absorbing every word like a machine built to judge. When the commander finished, the human finally turned his head slowly toward the rift. "Then you were right to call us," he said, but his voice did not hold relief, it held dread. The workers whispered among themselves. They didn't understand. If they were right to call the Deathworlders, why did the human look like someone preparing for a funeral? Why did he sound like their survival was not a victory but a delay? The human stepped forward and placed his hand on the ground. The soil under his palm cracked softly as a thin wave of blue light spread across the surface like ripples on water. The workers gasped as the light moved around their feet, climbed walls, crawled across roofs, and traveled into the forest surrounding the outpost. Then it vanished. The human stood back up, brushing dust off his hand as if he had just touched something disgusting. "It's worse than we thought," he said quietly. The commander's heart dropped into his stomach. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice trembling. The human looked at him with eyes that had clearly seen horrors this colony could never imagine. "Something followed the rift," he said. "Something old." His tone held a weight that made every person on Lyra 7 feel smaller than they ever had in their lives. The human continued speaking, but now there was sharpness in his words. This place was not chosen by mistake. It was chosen because it was weak. Because it was alone. Because whatever slipped through the tear could feed on it easily. The colony froze. Every person felt a chill move down their spine. The human was not talking about a ship or an army. He was talking about a creature, something alive, something hungry. The commander tried to speak again, but the words stuck in his throat. What followed us?" he finally whispered. The human looked at the sky again, and this time there was a shadow in his expression. A hint of something very rare in a Deathworlder: concern. "An old enemy," he said. "A species we once fought before the galaxy even knew our name. A species that should have been dead centuries ago." He didn't blink as he continued. "We thought we killed them all. We were wrong." The workers felt the ground beneath them become unstable, as if the world itself was reacting to the truth. For the first time, they saw fear, not panic, not terror, but a deep, cold fear, spread across the faces of their leaders. If the Deathworlders feared something, then that thing must be beyond imagination. The human took a slow breath and said the words that made everyone step back: "They are coming here." His voice echoed softly through the outpost, but the fear it carried hit everyone like a storm. Someone dropped a tool. Another stumbled back. A child started crying. The commander held onto a railing to stop his hands from shaking. The human didn't comfort them. He didn't offer hope. He simply looked at the ground, then at the sky, then at his ship. "You are standing on a battlefield," he said quietly. "But you are not soldiers." His tone held sadness, but not for the colony, for what was about to happen. The nightmare ship overhead hummed again, louder this time, like a giant heart preparing to pump fear into the air. The human walked back to the blue light beam and stared inside it. "What followed you here is not an animal. It's not a creature. It's not even a monster. It is hunger given shape." He turned back to them slowly. "And it knows you are alone." A wave of terror moved across the colony, so strong that no one spoke, no one moved, no one even breathed loudly. The workers finally understood why the human ship came without words, without warnings, without lights. This was not a rescue mission that IT was containment. The humans did not come to save them. They came to stop something worse, and the colony realized the most terrifying truth of all. If this was the humans sent to help, then what kind of enemy could force the Deathworlders to come with fear in their eyes? The sky above Lyra 7 hung heavy and quiet, as if even the universe held its breath. The people stood frozen, staring at the human who had spoken those terrifying words. They could not understand how something unknown, something unseen, something older than their empires, could make a Deathworlder look cautious. The nightmare ship still hovered above them, silent and dark, like a giant predator waiting to strike the moment the wrong movement was made. The air felt thick, almost sticky, as if fear itself had become part of the atmosphere. Every second dragged like an hour while the human pressed a device on his wrist and the ground beneath the colony trembled softly. The workers jumped. Some held onto each other. Some backed away as cracks of bright blue light spread like thin veins through the soil. The glow pulsed in slow breaths, like something alive, something ancient, had awakened underneath them. The commander felt sweat slide down his face. What are you doing?" he whispered, even though he already feared the answer. The human didn't look at him. Instead, he watched the cracks carefully, his eyes sharp and cold. "Scanning," he said, but his voice held no calm. It sounded strained, like he was waiting to see something he hoped would not be there. When the blue cracks finally dimmed, the human exhaled slowly, and that single breath was enough to terrify the entire colony. Because it wasn't a relieved breath. It was the breath of someone who knew the truth was worse than expected. He stood up straight, his hands curling into fists. The commander took a step closer, even though his knees were shaking. "Tell us," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. The human did not speak at first. His jaw tightened, and his eyes flicked to the rift still glowing faintly in the sky. The outpost became so quiet that the workers could hear their own hearts beating too fast. Finally, the human said in a low, controlled voice, "They were here." Those 3 words spread through the colony like poison. A woman covered her mouth, shaking. A child clung to her. Miners exchanged fearful glances. "What does that mean?" the commander asked again, softer, almost begging. The human turned toward him, and for the first time, his cold expression cracked, not with fear, but with something darker, disappointment. "It means they found you first," he said. The commander staggered backward as if struck. The workers looked at each other in confusion and rising panic. "Found us? Who found us?" someone shouted. The human slowly lifted his head to the sky. "The ones who made the rift," he whispered. "The ones who hunted us long before the Council ever knew Earth existed." He began to walk, slow heavy steps across the dirt, staring at the ground as if he saw memories only he could recognize. "We called them Riftborn," he said, his voice distant. "Creatures without shape, without mercy, without fear. They don't kill because they must. They kill because they hunger." His hand brushed against the rift scars in the soil. "We believed they died out. We believed we had ended them. But something survived. Something learned." His voice trembled on that last word, and the colony felt that tremble like a strike to the chest. The workers stepped back instinctively. Anyone, anything, that could evolve after being hunted by humans must have been truly terrifying. The human looked toward the forest at the edge of the colony. The trees were still. Too still. The wind did not even dare to move them. The whole landscape felt unnatural, as if the predators had passed through it and drained the life out of everything they touched. He pointed slowly. "They walked there," he said. "I can still feel the cold." His words made the workers' skin rise with chills. A young miner, shaking, spoke without thinking. "Why didn't they attack? If they came here, then why are we still alive?" His voice cracked in fear. The human turned toward him, and the miner instantly regretted asking. "Because they wanted to see who would respond," the human said. "They wanted to know which species still had the courage to answer a dying world." He stared into the miner's eyes. "They were calling us, luring us, testing us." The miner collapsed to his knees, tears filling his eyes. The rift flickered again in the sky, a thin ripple of light that cut through the darkness like a blade. Every person flinched. The human's hand tightened around a metal object on his belt. Something that hummed when he touched it, something dangerous. "They are watching from the other side," he whispered. "Waiting." The commander swallowed hard, feeling his throat burn. "Waiting for what?" he asked. The human's eyes met his. "Waiting for their hunters." A wave of cold swept across the colony. The truth settled in their minds like a stone sinking into deep water. The Riftborn had not come to destroy Lyra 7. Not yet. They had come to draw the Deathworlders back into the open. Humanity had disappeared from the galaxy long ago, hiding its strongest weapons, hiding its deadliest ships, hiding its true power. Now, because of a single SOS, the humans had returned, and the Riftborn wanted them. The human walked toward the center of the colony and pressed another command into his wrist device. He whispered in a language that sounded like metal grinding against stone, and the nightmare ship answered him. A huge section along its side slid open silently, revealing a vast interior glowing with deep blue light. The workers stared into it, their eyes widening. The inside didn't look like a ship. It looked like a stomach, or a weapon chamber, or a place where stars died. They could not understand what they were seeing. The human turned back to them, and this time his voice held emotion. Not fear, not panic, but anger. "You were not supposed to see this ship," he said coldly. "No world was supposed to see it again." He stepped forward, shadows crawling across his face. "But you opened a wound in the universe, and whatever crawled out of it will not stop until everything you love is dust." The miners backed away slowly. Some cried. Some shook. Some whispered apologies even though they didn't know who they were apologizing to. The commander's voice finally broke. Can you stop them?" he asked softly. The human looked up at the giant black ship, his jaw tight. "Maybe," he said, "if I'm not too late." As he said it, the entire colony went silent again, not because of fear this time, but because of something much worse. From deep inside the forest, something moved. Not loudly, not fast, but with a slow, scraping sound that felt wrong, too smooth, too quiet, too hungry. The human's head snapped toward the sound instantly. His face hardened. His eyes darkened. And he whispered something the colony would never forget. "They're already here." The colony froze the moment that sound came from the forest. It was soft, almost gentle, like metal sliding over stone. But everyone felt the wrongness in it. The workers did not breathe. The children did not cry. Even the wind refused to move. The human stepped forward slowly, each movement controlled, his eyes locked on the dark tree line where the sound had come from. Every muscle in his body tightened, as if he expected something to leap out at any second. The commander felt the back of his neck grow cold. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his legs refused to move. The forest stood silent for a heartbeat, then another, as if time itself had stopped. The human raised his hand slowly toward the colony, palm open, a silent signal telling them not to move, not to speak, not even to breathe loudly. He stared into the trees with a look that carried memories of battles too brutal for ordinary minds to understand. "Do not step forward," he whispered, and the outpost obeyed instantly. Every person felt like they were standing on the edge of a cliff with no ground beneath them. Then the trees shifted. Not from wind. Not from movement. But like something huge was brushing through them without touching them. Leaves curled inward. Branches bent. Shadows folded into themselves. The forest darkened so heavily that it looked like a hole had opened in the world. The workers gasped softly. Someone grabbed a friend's arm. Another worker quietly backed away until they hit a wall. The human's hand slowly reached toward a device on his belt, and when he touched it, the air around him vibrated with a strange hum. A single shape appeared between the trees. At first, it was nothing but darkness. A tall outline, thin and long, standing unnaturally still. No breathing, no shifting, no sound, just a tall shadow watching them. The human recognized it instantly. The way his face tightened, the way his shoulders lifted slightly, the way his jaw clenched. It all told the colony everything they needed to know. The enemy was here. The Riftborn. The ancient predators. The creatures humans once believed they had destroyed. The commander whispered, barely audible, "Is that one of them?" The human did not look away from the shadow. His voice was cold and steady. "No, that is only a scout." The workers froze as fear tore through them. If this was only a scout, then what did a full predator look like? What did a swarm look like? What horror waited behind the rift? The shadow took one step forward, and the ground beneath it cracked like ice. Its leg, if it could be called a leg, was long and thin, bending in a direction no living being's limb should bend. Its body flickered for a moment, as if made of smoke and metal at the same time. Its face, if it had one, did not have eyes, only two hollow spaces that sucked in the light around them. The miners trembled wildly. Some covered their faces. Some stared in disbelief, unable to look away. The human kept walking slowly toward the creature, each step silent and heavy with tension. The creature moved again, gliding instead of walking, its body floating slightly above the ground. The human finally stopped walking when he stood just far enough to keep the colony behind him but close enough to meet the threat head-on. He raised his chin slightly, staring at the creature without fear. "I know what you are," he said softly, "and I know why you came." The creature tilted its head, and a soft, high-pitched sound vibrated through the air, sharp enough to make the workers cover their ears. It was not a voice. It was not communication. It was hunger, pure and simple, expressed in a frequency that felt like a blade slicing through bone. The human didn't flinch. He stared at it with cold, unblinking eyes. "You followed the rift because you thought we were gone," he said. "You thought you would find a weak world to feed on." His voice lowered until it almost became a growl. "You were wrong." The creature straightened slowly, its thin limbs stretching outward, making its body look wider and larger, like a shadow growing teeth. The human tightened his grip on the metal device on his belt, but he did not activate it yet. He was waiting, watching, calculating. The monster glided forward another few inches, its hollow eye sockets locked onto the human's chest as if measuring where to strike. The colony behind him trembled in terror. The commander yelled softly, "Get back! Please get back!" But the human didn't move. He stood like a wall, like nothing in the universe could push him aside. His presence alone felt like a shield between the colony and the creature, even though he stood with no armor, no heavy weapons, only a device that hummed softly in his palm. Then the creature struck. It moved so fast that the world blurred. The trees bent backward. The ground caved under its force. It shot toward the human like a spear of pure darkness. The workers screamed. The commander reached forward as if to help but stopped when the human finally moved. His hand snapped up, and the device in his palm exploded with a flash of blue light. The creature collided with the blast mid-air, slamming into a shimmering force that wrapped around the human like a shield. The impact echoed across the outpost like thunder, shaking dust from rooftops and sending several workers stumbling backward. The creature screamed, this time with sound, a deep, crackling roar that felt like ice digging into flesh. It recoiled, its limbs twisting violently, its body flickering between shapes. The workers covered their ears, many falling to the ground. The human pushed forward one step, his voice calm even in the chaos. "You should have stayed in the dark," he said. "We always find you." The creature convulsed, then slipped back into the trees, its body dissolving into mist as it retreated. But the forest did not return to normal. The shadows thickened. The air grew colder. The silence became heavier. It was not running. It was calling. Calling for more. The human lowered his device, his chest rising with slow, controlled breaths. He turned back to the colony, his voice low but strong. "That was only the beginning," he said. "They know we are here now." Fear twisted through every person like a knife. The commander grabbed the human's arm, his voice shaking. "Can your ship stop them?" The human looked at the nightmare ship in the sky, then back at the rift glowing faintly behind the clouds. And for the first time since arriving, he hesitated. "I don't know," he whispered. The human's hesitation was like a knife through the colony's heart. They had seen him face a creature that should not exist. They had watched him stand against a nightmare with steady hands and cold eyes. They had believed, hoped, that the nightmare ship above them meant safety, or at least power strong enough to make the darkness hesitate. But now, hearing him whisper, "I don't know," the entire outpost felt the ground shift beneath their feet, as if hope itself was breaking apart. The commander stepped back, his breath trembling. He had never seen a human unsure. In every ancient story, humans were the unstoppable ones, the destroyers of extinction-level threats, the species that fought when everyone else surrendered. If even a Deathworlder feared what was coming, then Lyra 7 was standing on the edge of something far worse than they imagined. The rift flickered in the sky again, thin and sharp like a wound trying to open wider. The human lifted his head slowly, studying the glow with a calculating expression. But beneath that sharp focus there was something more: exhaustion, regret, a sadness that ran deep. The commander saw it and swallowed hard. "You've fought them before," he whispered. The human didn't answer. He kept staring at the sky, but the silence he gave was enough. His eyes held memories too heavy to speak aloud. The workers watched him carefully. His shoulders were tense, his jaw tight. His hand still hovered over the device on his belt, not because he wanted to fight, but because he expected to need it again soon. A soft breeze rolled across the colony, carrying the cold scent of the forest where the creature had disappeared. It brushed against the workers' faces like a warning. The human closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, something had changed. The cold calculation remained, but now there was anger behind it. Slow, simmering anger that rose from old wounds. He finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "The Riftborn are not hunters," he said. "They are harvesters." The workers stepped back at the word. Harvesters. It sounded wrong, twisted, like something born from nightmares, not science. The human pointed toward the forest. "They do not kill you right away. They drain energy. They drain life. They drain everything that makes your world alive." His eyes moved to the power stations behind the colony. "Your lights failing. Your sensors dying. Your machines acting strange. That was not malfunction." His voice hardened. "That was feeding." The crowd shivered. A woman covered her child's ears. The commander's mouth hung open a little. "Feeding?" he echoed weakly. The human nodded once. "They weaken a world so that when they strike, no one can resist." He stepped closer to the scared miners. "They chose Lyra 7 first because you are isolated. Small. Unprotected. Easy to consume." Tears welled in a worker's eyes as he spoke. "Then why didn't they attack? Why wait?" The human looked at him, and for a brief second, something gentle flickered in his expression. Pity. "Because they were not waiting for you," he said. "They were waiting for us." His gaze hardened. "We fought them once. Long ago. Before humans became Deathworlders. Before we became feared." He looked away, his voice suddenly distant. "We thought we wiped them out. But we did not understand what they truly were." The commander took a shaky breath. "What are they?" he whispered. The human's answer came like a cold wind blowing across the colony. "Parasites of reality." He knelt down and touched the cracked soil where the Riftborn scout had stood. "They do not come from a world. They come from the spaces between worlds. From the dark places where even physics ends. The soil beneath his fingers trembled slightly, as if responding to his touch. When they appear in your world, they take shape from your fear. That is why they look different to every species. The miners exchanged terrified looks. A young woman whispered, "What do humans see?" The human paused. His jaw clenched. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost broken. "We see the thing that nearly ended us." That silence, thick, suffocating silence, spread across Lyra 7 again. The workers looked at him with new understanding. He was not here because he wanted to be. He was here because he had no choice. The Riftborn were an old wound in human history, one they had tried to bury, hide, and erase. But now the past had clawed its way back into the present. Suddenly, the rift flared brighter, sending a ripple of cold air across the colony. The nightmare ship above them vibrated, reacting instantly. Its black hull rippled with waves of blue light, as if the vessel itself sensed danger. The human looked up toward it and whispered something in his language. The ship answered with a low, deep pulse that echoed across the ground. The colony felt it in their bones. The commander stepped forward slowly. "Is that ship strong enough?" The human stared at the vessel with strange eyes, part pride, part pain, part fear. "This ship was built for one purpose," he said. "To hunt the Riftborn wherever they hide." He touched the metal device on his belt again. "It is not the strongest ship humans ever made. But it is the last one we kept awake." The workers felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. If this was the last active human hunter ship, then humanity must have turned to something much darker after the Riftborn Wars. The human walked toward the center of the colony, standing directly beneath the nightmare ship. His shadow stretched across the ground like a long, dark omen. He pressed 2 fingers to his wrist and spoke in that metallic language again. This time, the ship responded more dramatically. Its underside opened slowly, revealing a swirling vortex of blue energy, like a storm trapped inside a machine. The miners panicked and backed away, but the human lifted a hand. "Do not run," he said, his voice calm but firm. "This is a barrier field. I am sealing the colony." The commander's eyes widened. "Sealing? Why?" The human looked at him with a grim expression. "So nothing else can get in." Then he paused. "And so nothing already inside can escape." A chill went through every single person. They realized what he meant. The scout that attacked earlier was not alone. The human's ship knew it. The ground knew it. The air knew it. Something else was still inside the colony boundary, hiding, waiting, feeding. The workers stepped closer together, trying to find comfort in numbers, but fear cracked through them anyway. The forest darkened again. A long, dragging sound slid across the earth. The human slowly lowered his hand from the device. "It's coming back," he whispered. The sound that rose from the forest was slower this time, deeper, dragging across the earth as if something enormous had crawled closer, tasting the air, feeling the new energy around the colony. The human stood completely still, eyes focused on the dark tree line, every muscle in his body coiled like a tightly wound spring. The colony behind him trembled as one living creature, breaths short, hearts pounding so hard they could hear each other's fear. The barrier field above them shimmered softly, a giant dome of faint blue light, but even that protective glow did not ease the terror spreading through the outpost. They understood the truth now. This was no longer a warning. This was no longer a hunt. This was survival. The human stepped forward, boots cracking small stones under his feet, and raised the device on his wrist again. The nightmare ship responded immediately, sending a ripple of energy across its hull. The workers stared at it, unable to look away. The ship felt alive. No, more than alive. It felt aware, watching the forest with the same cold, dangerous attention as its master. The commander moved beside the human, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Will the barrier hold them out?" The human didn't answer right away. He stared at the dome, studying the faint cracks of energy that pulsed through it like nerves. His silence was worse than a scream. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, but heavy with truth. "It will hold them out," he said slowly. "But it won't hold them in." The commander froze. His eyes widened. "In? You mean," the human nodded once. "There's already more than one inside." The colony erupted in quiet panic, short gasps, trembling hands, people holding onto loved ones, hearts sinking into cold despair. They all turned toward the forest again, where the darkness seemed thicker, heavier, almost liquid. Something moved between the trees. A shape. A flicker. A whisper of something that shouldn't exist. The human took another step forward, voice low and steady. "Listen to me carefully," he said, and the colony gathered as close as fear allowed. His eyes were sharp, glowing faintly with the reflection of the barrier's light. "The Riftborn are not here to play. They are not here to understand. They are not here to rule." His gaze moved slowly across the terrified faces before him. "They are here to erase." A wave of cold rolled through the crowd. People clutched their chests. A woman slowly knelt to comfort her trembling daughter. A young miner wiped tears and whispered, "Why us? Why this place?" The human's gaze softened, not gently, but with the painful honesty of someone who had carried this truth for far too long. "Because they do not care who you are," he said. "Only that you are alive." Suddenly, the ground beneath the colony vibrated with a soft rumble. Workers staggered. Tools fell to the ground. Metal containers slid across the dirt. The human spun, eyes narrowing. "It's under us," he whispered. The commander felt his heart stop. "Under us?" he repeated weakly. The human crouched, placing his palm on the soil. The ground pulsed once, an unnatural, cold shock that traveled up his arm like a warning. His voice dropped to a whisper. "They're moving through the earth." Another vibration struck, harder this time. Lamps shook. A storage unit tipped over. Dust rose from rooftops. Panic cracked through the colony like lightning. People began to back away, but the human raised his hand sharply. "Don't run," he ordered, his voice sharp enough to cut through fear. "Running draws them faster." But the ground didn't stop shaking. It grew stronger, deeper, like something large was tunneling beneath the colony, circling them, choosing its moment. The human stood tall again, eyes scanning every corner of the settlement, as if he expected the earth to burst open beneath his feet. He pressed a hidden button on his wrist, and the nightmare ship pulsed in response. A large, segmented panel on the ship opened like a throat revealing jagged spirals of blue fire. The ship let out a low, vibrating hum, a sound that felt like a warning to anyone listening in the dark. The human's voice turned grim. "They know the ship is here," he said. "They know what it can do." The commander swallowed hard. "What can it do?" The human turned slightly toward him, shadows crossing his face. "End them," he said. "Completely." Before the commander could speak again, the ground erupted. A massive crack tore across the colony floor like lightning striking stone. Dirt exploded upward. Workers screamed and scrambled back. A long, black shape shot out of the ground with speed too fast for eyes to follow. It slammed onto the metal walkway, its limbs spreading outward, its body expanding and shrinking like a creature struggling to keep a physical shape. It had no face, just a smooth, liquid surface that rippled as if something beneath was trying to break free. The workers backed away until they hit walls. Some stared in disbelief. Some fell to their knees. The creature tilted its featureless head toward them, and the air around it grew colder. The human didn't move. The creature took a step forward, its limbs stabbing into the metal with a sharp hiss. It was bigger than the scout, far bigger. Taller than a doorway. Wider than a hover truck. Its body flickered from shape to shape, like reality couldn't decide what it was. A child cried behind the crowd. The creature froze at the sound. Its head turned slowly toward the noise. The human stepped between the child and the monster. The creature lunged. In one swift motion, the human slammed the device on his wrist. A shockwave burst outward, crashing into the creature and sending it flying backward with a high-pitched, distorted scream. The colony shook from the impact. The creature's body convulsed violently on the ground, its limbs bending in horrific ways, its form glitching like broken hologram static. The air tightened with pressure as if the world itself was holding its breath. The human's voice cut through the chaos. "These are not the worst of them," he said. "These are the ones testing us." The creature slowly rose again, its body twisting into a long, stretched shape, its hollows glowing with a sick, pale light. The workers backed away further, some covering their eyes. The human tightened his stance, eyes cold, jaw clenched. His voice dropped to a whisper, heavy with dread and anger. "The stronger ones are still coming." The creature hissed, a bone-deep sound that made the barrier field tremble. The rift in the sky shuddered with a pulse of light, as if answering the creature's call. The human stepped forward again, raising the device, and the nightmare ship above him prepared to fire. The colony braced itself for a war it had never been meant to witness. And in that terrifying silence before the next attack, the human whispered the words that chilled every soul on Lyra 7. "This is no invasion. This is a harvest." The creature's hiss echoed across Lyra 7 like a cold knife scraping against metal, and the colony felt its bones vibrate with the sound. The nightmare ship above them pulsed with blue fire, preparing to unleash something ancient and terrible, but the human did not activate it yet. He stood in front of the colony like a lone wall against a storm of darkness, his eyes never leaving the creature twisting its body into unnatural shapes. The air between them rippled with tension so thick that even breathing felt dangerous. The workers clung to each other, shaking, every heartbeat louder than footsteps. Every second weighed on them like a heavy chain. The creature moved again, slower now, as if studying the human, measuring him, testing him. Its liquid skin shifted like boiling ink, leaking tendrils of shadow that dissolved into the ground. The human stepped forward, boots scraping against metal. "You shouldn't have come back," he whispered, his voice low, sharp, filled with memories of battles buried deep in humanity's past. The creature's shapeless head tilted, and the pale glow inside its hollow center flared like a dying star. It let out a soft, broken sound, something that almost sounded like laughter. The commander stepped back in fear as the creature suddenly replicated itself, its shape splitting into 3 flickering silhouettes before merging again. The crowd gasped. The human didn't flinch. "You learned new tricks," he murmured, not impressed but weary, like someone who had fought the same war for too many lifetimes. The creature lunged again, faster this time, a streak of shadow slicing through the air. The human raised his arm and slammed the device on his wrist. The shockwave burst outward in a crackling ring of energy that threw the creature back, smashing it into the colony wall with a thunderous boom. Dust rained from the roofs. A child screamed. Several workers fell to the ground. The creature twisted on the metal, its limbs stretching like rubber, its body rewriting itself in broken spasms. It pushed off the wall with a sickening crack and landed silently. And then, slowly, horrifically, it smiled, its face splitting open into a jagged, crooked line that bent far beyond anything natural. The workers cried out in terror. The humans stared at it with a cold, hollow expression. "They remember us," he said softly, "and they are mocking us." Before anyone could react, the ground behind the colony tore open as another creature rose from beneath the soil. Then another. Then a third. The workers screamed, stumbling back, but the human raised both hands quickly. "Stay together," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Do not run. That's what they want." But terror was stronger than reason. A young man broke away from the crowd and sprinted toward the supply building. He didn't make it halfway. One of the Riftborn darted across the ground like black lightning, too fast to track. Its limb shot forward, piercing the young man through the chest. His scream froze in his throat. His body dropped silently to the floor. The colony watched in horror as the creature absorbed the life from his body in a few seconds, draining his warmth, his color, his energy, leaving only a lifeless gray husk behind. A woman collapsed, wailing. Another worker vomited from fear. The human's face hardened with a deep, burning rage. He clenched his jaw so tightly it trembled. The creature turned toward him slowly, almost proudly, as if showing him a message written in death. The human whispered one word, soft, deadly, ancient. The nightmare ship responded instantly. A beam of swirling blue energy shot downward, hitting the creature dead on. The impact was silent, but the effect was horrifying. The creature convulsed in the energy, its form breaking apart like shattered glass, pieces dissolving in midair as though reality itself rejected it. The other creatures screeched in fury, their bodies expanding and twisting. One rose taller than the outpost walls, its limbs growing long and jagged like spears. Another grew wider, spreading across the ground like a crawling shadow. The third melted into the soil, vanishing instantly. The human stepped back, scanning the ground. "One is under us," he warned. "It's trying to break the barrier from below." The rift in the sky pulsed violently, sending waves of sickly white light across the colony. The forest shook. The ground hummed. The nightmare ship groaned, its hull vibrating as if bracing itself. "They are opening the tier wider," the human said, his voice heavy with dread. "More of them are coming." The commander grabbed his arm, desperation breaking through his voice. "Can you stop them?" The human stared at the rift, then at the swarm rising from the earth, then at the terrified colony behind him. Something inside him broke. Something old. Something painful. He whispered, "I can hold them, but not forever." The commander's breath trembled. "Then what do we do?" The human looked at him with eyes filled with centuries of war, loss, and scars hidden behind silence. "You stay behind me," he said, "and you pray the ship wakes up in time." The creatures charged. The ground exploded with darkness. The human activated the device on his wrist with a force that broke blood vessels in his hand. The nightmare ship roared, a deep, cosmic sound that shook the sky. And as blue fire erupted across the battlefield, the human whispered one final line that made the colony tremble. "We're not fighting an enemy tonight, we're fighting extinction." The sky above Lyra, 7 exploded into blue fire as the nightmare ship finally awakened fully, its ancient systems roaring with a power that felt older than the colony, older than the rift, older than anything the workers had ever imagined. The creatures charging across the ground screeched in fury, their bodies bending and breaking in impossible shapes as the blue flames washed over them. The human stood at the center of it all, his silhouette outlined in the burning glow, one man holding back a storm of nightmares with nothing but a device strapped to his wrist and a ship that hummed like a sleeping god. The colony watched, mesmerized and terrified, as the riftborn shrieked and twisted in the glow, some melting into the soil like spilled ink, others cracking apart like glass dropped from a tower. But even as the ship fought with impossible strength, the rift in the sky pulsed faster, thick, sharp, hungry, as if responding to the creature's cries. The human's eyes shot upward, and his expression changed from fierce determination to raw fear. Not fear for himself, but fear for what was coming next. The ground shook beneath their feet. A deep vibration rose from the soil, slow at first, then stronger, until the colony felt like it was standing on the chest of a giant waking from a nightmare. The workers clung to each other, tears running down their faces. The commander stumbled as the ground cracked. The human turned and shouted, "Stay inside the barrier. Do not move." His voice trembled for the first time. That tremble was enough to break the colony's hope. If he was afraid, then what could they possibly do? The nightmare ship fired again, a massive beam that sliced through 3 riftborn shapes rising like shadows from the ground. Their bodies shattered, scattering like dust in the wind. But the rift didn't weaken. It grew brighter, wider, more violent, ripping at the air like claws tearing through fabric. The human knew what it meant. The miners knew what it meant. The commander whispered it under his breath. "The bigger one is coming." The human pressed a blooded hand against his wrist device and activated a command no one understood. The nightmare ship responded instantly, forming a massive shield around the colony. Thicker, brighter, burning like a second sun. But even the ship seemed to groan under the pressure, its hull creaking like metal under too much weight. The human's breath came heavy now. He was pushing himself beyond normal limits, his arm trembling as he held the device steady, veins in his neck tightening. He whispered something in his language, and the colony felt the emotion behind it. Fear mixed with determination, a warrior calling for strength from ghosts long gone. The rift roared. A sound unlike anything living or dead tore through the sky. It was not a scream. It was not a voice. It was something deeper, something ancient, something that had not spoken in 1,000 years. The Riftborn were calling their true form. The forest bent in every direction as wind exploded outward. The colony dropped to its knees, covering their heads, crying out in fear. The human struggled to remain standing. His boots dug into the earth, his body shaking violently as he fought the pressure of the rift expanding against the barrier field. Cracks of white light spread across the sky, bright enough to blind. The commander's voice broke as he shouted, "What is happening? What is coming?" The human closed his eyes for a heartbeat, and when he opened them again, they glowed faintly blue with the reflection of the ship above. His voice was barely more than a whisper, but every person heard him, their queen. The one we never killed. The workers froze. Even the wind seemed to stop. The queen, the mind behind all Riftborn, the one that controlled every shadow, every creature, every nightmare that crawled through the rift. If she came through, no ship, no colony, no world would survive. The rift flashed again, brighter than lightning, deeper than night. A massive shape began to push through, not fully formed, not physical yet, but real enough to cast a shadow across the entire colony. The human's face drained of color. His barrier flickered. The nightmare ship shook under the growing energy. The workers screamed and ducked as parts of the ship cracked, metal bending like hot wax. The commander felt tears mix with dust on his face. "We're all going to die," he whispered to himself. But the human heard him. And for the first time since arriving, the human turned fully toward the colony. His eyes were sharp, hard, burning with a fire not from fear, but from fury. He stood tall, forcing his broken hand around the device, ignoring the blood running down his wrist. "You're not dying today," he said. His voice was steady again. Strong. A voice that sounded like it had carried whole worlds on its back. He turned toward the nightmare ship and shouted a command so loud the air cracked. The ship reacted instantly. Panels opened along its sides. The ground pulsed. The air charged with electricity. A deep hum rose from the ship, slow, growing, rising, until it became a roar that shook the entire colony. And then the ship revealed its final weapon. A column of swirling blue fire shot from its core straight into the rift, striking the forming queen in mid-emergence. The blast was so violent the sky shook like thunder trapped in a jar. The queen shrieked, her half-formed shape convulsing, but she did not retreat. She pushed harder. The barrier shook harder. The humans screamed something at the ship, something desperate, something broken. The ship screamed back, energy surging as its hull cracked from pressure. The ground split open beneath them. A massive wave of energy blasted across Lyra 7. Workers fell. The commander was thrown backward. The human dropped to one knee, blood pouring from his palm, struggling to hold the device steady. The rift flickered violently. The queen's shadow grew larger. The nightmare ship groaned like a dying titan, and then everything went silent. A deep, crushing silence, like the universe itself had stopped. The rift dimmed for a second, just a second. But in that second, the human's expression changed not to relief, not to victory, but to horror. He whispered one final line, barely audible, but enough to freeze the blood of every person on Lyra 7, "She's not alone." The rift exploded in bright white light, and the screen would cut to black.